Tonight we talk about citizens of our community getting involved with law enforcement, the curious case of Michael Irvin, but we begin with a little bit of Baton Rouge history. Roll it, Kyle. So much to get into tonight. We're going to talk about this situation involving former Cowboys wide receiver Michael Irvin. The Baton Rouge Police Department is having another Citizens Academy. Sergeant Elgene McNeely will be here to talk with us about that. But we begin tonight's show with a conversation with Judge Yvette Alexander, who's here for the first time on the show to talk with us about her journey to where she is right now and the judge's role and your colleague's role in dealing with public safety. Judge Alexander is the first African-American female elected to city court judge, and that was in 95?
1995.
And so
seems like yesterday.
Seems like yesterday. Well, Judge, it's so good to have you here on the show.
Thank you.
First of all, let's talk about why you chose law. Why was that your North Star?
Well, thank you for having me. The reason why I chose law was because when I was younger, I watched so many injustices happening. According to my parents, I always wanted to be a judge. Now, I don't remember that. They said we would play and I would pretend like I was the judge, but I can't remember back that far. But I do remember one of my friends, something happening to them, wrongfully accused, and he had a hard time getting out of it because there were no African-American lawyers up in North Louisiana, so I decided to go to law school. I went to Grambling for 2 years, then went to a special program at LSU where I went to law school for 3 years. So in 5 years, I had a law degree. Wow. They no longer have that program, but I enjoyed it while I could. After that, I decided that being a lawyer just wasn't enough. I faced a lot of judges who didn't look like me, a lot of judges who didn't have the same feelings about justice that I had. So I decided that the route to be able to do more would be through becoming a judge. So I decided to run for judgeship in 1995. That journey was a long journey. If you think about it, maybe not, but looking back on it, it was well worth the effort I had to put in it. I worked for Fox McKithen, who was the Secretary of State.
That's right.
A wonderful guy.
We remember Fox.
Remember him. Yes, he was a character. My job was to keep him out of trouble, which I did.
And guard his one-liners, because he always had a one-liner for you.
He used to say, if you don't help your friends, who will you help?
Right.
You know, so he had the same kind of heart that I have. Being a judge is a public servant, and our job is not necessarily to get to equal justice for all, but to make sure that our community is a better place also. So I spent a lot of time in the community doing different things, trying to help out. I believe that the main reason that we're seeing so much crime, so much trouble in the schools is because, number one, we have children raising children.
Right.
And number two, I can say this because I consider myself an elder. The elders in the community are not stepping up to do what we need to do. For instance, when I walked home from school and my parents said, don't stop at the store and buy any candy, when we did, the neighbor who saw us there called and told my parents.
The news made it home before you did.
And the whipping.
Right.
And the whipping. So we don't have that today, and we need to go back to that. My dad has a charter school up in Monroe, and he used to say that the more time you spend with kids, the better off they are. So he would have after-school programs.
Right.
They're not as prevalent as they used to be when we were growing up, and Saturday academies.
Right.
Everything to make the kids think about it. Same thing about voting. The reason why there's so much apathy about voting is because they haven't been taught. My parents voted every election, and guess who went with them? I did.
Right.
So I vote every election. I took my kids. My kids are going to do the same thing. So it passes down. We have lost that community touch that we used to have, and we need to work on getting it back.
When you are on the bench and I'll ask a two-part question, and you look across the floor and you see a young man that is in a tough situation, because he did not have options, and he may be someone, if given the opportunity, who could turn his life around. Conversely, you look across and you see a young man who is just hell-bent on getting to the state penitentiary. I want you to start answering that question. We're going to take a break and come back and let you finish. And I know you got to be careful because you're sitting on
Right,
the bench,
I'm
but
a
what-
sitting
yeah,
judge,
yeah.
and you can look in the audience and make that decision.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to look at the person,
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at their background, you have to look at their record,
Mm-hmm.
and from that record you should be able to tell. Now, I think we live in a society now where the biggest and the baddest
Right.
equals the best.
Right.
So sometimes young kids, they come from a very good home and they know what's right, but when they get out in the peer pressure, it becomes too much.
Hang on, we're going to come back, finish with the judge. Stay right there. Back with Judge Alexander talking about being in the courtroom and some of the young people that you see in the courtroom. Obviously, you've got to make sure that the law is applied equally and accurately in the courtroom. But at the same time, the reality of how some of these kids get there can't be ignored. Obviously, it can't play much of a part in what you do, but it is a factor in how we see so many of these young people just destroying themselves and each other.
That's correct. What I want to make a difference is in Baton Rouge, you know, we have a separate juvenile court for young people
Yep.
that are under 18.
Yep.
But the ones that probably I worry the most about are the ones between the ages of 18 and 23, right in there, because they still have the mind of a young person,
Yeah.
but they're totally grown, and so they're trying to prove a point, or they think this is the best route to go. But I think that every now and then when you talk to them, you will know which ones will be able to benefit from a class, from a mentor, from me talking to them, giving them a stern lash whipping, I should say. The one thing over the 27 years that I think is the most important, and it doesn't happen it doesn't happen a lot at all. When I get a father who calls and asks me, can I get my son out of jail? I'm just excited about that, because I think the male role with the male is very important.
Right.
And when the father calls, he's probably going to do more damage to that young man than I would do on a
Right.
court. So I think, number one, the parenting needs to be adjusted. And I'm not saying that everybody has to have a father in the household,
sure.
but we need some kind of organizations. You know, we have a lot of those that used to come in and mentor the young men. Same thing for young women, come in and mentor them. It's very difficult in a society that we live in to be able to cross-sex mentor. You know, there's just some things you can teach a young boy that I just have no clue about.
Right.
And there are some things that I can teach a young woman about that you have no clue about. So we've got to go back to that old adage of the old ways where we were one big family.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
Earlier this week, we saw the incident that took place at the alternative school, and obviously there are details about that still need to be discovered. But it was really sad to see,
Yeah.
and it's indicative of things like this we see around the country. And you know, from my standpoint, we as a community have to do more to assist what's happening on the other side. It can't just be about law enforcement. It can't just be about the courts. It's got to be about us stepping up to do as much as we can with these kids, because you know, that wasn't just embarrassing, it was saddening, Judge.
It was very sad to see, but we have to be careful not to judge from these little tidbits
Sure.
that we see from social media.
Right.
Number one, you know, if social media had been around when I was a child, I probably would have got more whippings than I did get. But it wasn't. So these kids live under a lot more pressure than we do.
A lot more spotlight, too.
That's right. Everything you do, somebody's probably got it on film or
Right.
got it on somewhere. But we have to be careful about that to see what actually really happened. And there's a boiling point for everybody. And to make sure that we don't judge because of that. But what I will say, that even the idea that these kids are at an alternative school kind of labels them. You know, there's labels everywhere. So my suggestion, once again, is that we start very young with Head Start. Start over with that. You know, just start at Head Start and make sure we instilled in them being a good citizen means this. Being a good person in your society means this. Our community is not bad. We have a great community. We just need to work together to make it better.
Judge Yvette Alexander, this won't be the last time you're going to be here, right?
I'll come back.
All right.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Up next, let's talk with Sergeant McNeely about the Citizens Academy at BRPD. That's next. Sergeant Elgene McNeely is here. We call him Gino. He's the public information guy over at the Baton Rouge Police Department, runs communications there. So we were set to talk about the Citizens Academy that's about to begin in a couple of weeks, but got Sarge here. Have to ask him about a couple of news stories from this week. First up, the Baton Rouge Police Department had a press conference earlier this week to address the Georgia man who was here and that situation. Anything you want to say about that?
Yes, we want to add a little bit more to it and let people know that we had a timeline from when he left Happy's to when he got to the bus station. So luckily, because of the camera systems that we have downtown, thanks to the foundation being forthcoming with providing those resources, and thankfully for the business, we're thankful for the businesses that are in that area. They provided us with camera footage that allowed us to have somewhat of a timeline showing the direction of travel and his footprints. We also want to add that this investigation is ongoing, and somebody could possibly be arrested for some things that are pertaining to this investigation. So we want to be able to put that message out and let people know that there is a potential portion of this investigation where somebody could be arrested for their actions.
Right. And I wanted to give a chance for clarity on that. And then you referenced these cameras that that the foundation that we're part of was able to buy or replace downtown Baton Rouge, and they played an integral role in some of this stuff, as I understand it. So there's news right there. The next thing was this brawl at the alternative school. Earlier, and a couple of officers were injured, and so is there anything, I know that's ongoing, but is there anything you can say about that?
Well, the Sheriff Department, they're doing the investigation because they were the initial agency that was there. We were called to assist them, but upon our arrival, it was a big brawl of students, parents were involved, and we had students attacking law enforcement officers there. We apprehended some of those persons that were fighting police officers. Baton Rouge Police in particular arrested 2 juveniles and placed them in juvenile detention for battery upon a police officer. And we had an officer that was injured who is now on restricted duty with follow-up with his doctor because of his injury.
Have you ever seen anything like that before?
No, not to that level, a magnitude of disruption with all the students and the parents. You know, so we see that there's a major problem. We're working with the school system in an attempt to resolve that issue.
Well, I appreciate that. That's something we got to get you in here to do a little bit more of from time to time is come in and give context to a lot of what we see in the news. I think that information about the Georgia man and what happened with him is definitely newsworthy. Let's talk about the Citizens Academy. Let's put that flyer up. That's coming back around. This will be the 3rd time within the last year that you've had a group of citizens who sign up. You see there on the screen. It's going to last from March 21st to May 16th of this year. And what is the Citizens Academy?
Well, we're excited about this program. You know, we started it last year. Citizens are able to come in and learn about the police department. We also want to add that even though we have those days on the actual flyer, it could possibly be pushed back because we're getting such an influx of applications in.
Might have to expand it?
Yes. So our start date may possibly be pushed back a week or two just because of that, because we want to give everybody an opportunity. But it's an exciting adventure for our agency to give the citizens some insight on law enforcement and what we do, why we do, and where we at with serving the community.
What do you find to be the biggest misconception that they have coming in that they clear up by the time that they are done with the class?
Well, you know, TV hurts us a lot because people feel
Not
that.
this TV.
No, the shows.
The shows, okay.
Yes, the police crime shows.
Right.
People feel that we can solve a crime
In an hour.
Yeah, in an hour, and it takes much more than that. It's so involved, and so much goes with it. But when you see the crime shows, you know, they believe that all those things can happen, like you say,
Right.
within an
Shoot
hour.
the gun out of his hand.
Yeah.
And you know, the information, so I was a part of one of the discussions that you had where people can talk about their perceptions. And I think that is so healthy for y'all to dialogue with them. What's been the biggest win, in your opinion, doing this Citizens Academy?
Just as you said, it's a change in perception. People come in with an idea of what they think from sitting on their sofa and seeing the news and seeing things that are happening throughout the city and throughout the country. But it changes perception because it gives you an insight to see what's actually going on in the inner workings. And you also get an opportunity to develop a relationship with some law enforcement. So you have direct contact with the chief. You have direct contact with people that are making things happen in Baton Rouge. So overall perception, we've seen hugs, we've seen people crying, you know, it's been an awesome thing.
It's great, and this is the third one. So that's the Citizens Academy. As of right now, it's set to start on March 21st. If it's going to be moved back, we'll get Gino back here to give you the update on that. Sarge, I appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about Michael Irvin. Even though he's a former Cowboy, and you know how I feel about the Dallas Cowboys, his story is compelling. Dietrich Moore is going to be here on the set to talk with you about that next. So I wanted to invite one of the best legal minds I know to come into the studio to talk with us about the curious case of Michael Irvin. So if you're not up to date on it, here is the timeline. February 5th, Michael Irvin is at the Marriott Renaissance Hotel in Phoenix, Arizona. He's there doing coverage for the NFL Network and ESPN for the Super Bowl. In the evening, after he finishes his duties on television, goes back to the hotel, ends up in the hotel bar drinking a club soda, talking with patrons there, telling stories as Irvin is known to do. A couple of the guys there ask him to take pictures. Irv says, "I'll take a picture with you, but not in a bar. Got to do it outside. It's a bad look." They walk outside into the lobby area, take a couple of pictures. At that point, a young lady who's working the front desk comes from around the desk, approaches the men who were talking after taking the picture. She has an engagement with Michael Irvin. Lasts about 90 seconds, according to his attorney. She then leaves after laughing and joking with him. He gets onto the elevator, leaves, goes to his room. That is the end of it, right? No. During the middle of the night, hotel security contacts Irvin and tells him he must leave the hotel immediately because he has been accused of something. They don't really tell him what it is. Hours go by, we find out he's been accused of sexual misconduct with an employee of the Marriott. ESPN benches him. NFL Network benches him. And it's all over the news. Well, two men who were in the bar with Irvin and ended up outside taking pictures with him call into the Tony Bruno radio show. Tony Bruno was nationally syndicated, now is in the local area. They say, "Hey, we were there. We were not only in the bar with him, offered him a drink. He refused it because he had work the next morning. We also were out in the lobby, took pictures with him, and was there when he was approached by his accuser." They never saw anything untoward between him and her and actually witnessed him getting onto the elevator by himself. Irvin now has since sued the Marriott. His defamation suit is up to about $100 million. That's the number that he's suing them for. So obviously this is still being, and you're up to speed now, this is still being investigated.
Right.
I can't make heads or tails. Here is what I believe. I believe, and I want to be careful, that his past, it appears, has been used against him. Things that he did 20, 25 years ago are being used against him today. Because all of the present evidence, and there could be evidence that flips this the other way, but everything present looks like this man was defamed, had financial opportunities taken away from him on the basis of a yet to be proven allegation, and the hotel looks to be in trouble.
I would agree.
Okay.
Clay, if you want to dive into it a little bit, Michael Irvin pled a no contest plea to a cocaine charge and a misdemeanor marijuana charge some years back. He was known for being a party guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think he runs from that reputation of,
Right.
at one time, he was a party guy. But here's what's peculiar about this situation. He had to be very pointed about what he was doing because he was unwilling to take a picture at the bar. So that means he was keenly aware of his surroundings, and he was obviously not about making any mistakes. He was not willing to accept any drinks that were bought for him at the bar. Again, being keenly aware of what the perception could be had someone seen him acting out of order. I feel like you're exactly correct. I mean, if someone is accused, they've been confronted with the law, they've gone through whatever exercise the courts may have deemed they needed to do to fulfill its requirements to the court, those things should be put behind him and he should be able to move forward. He's an All-American, he's a Hall of Famer, he's a superstar. ESPN recognizes his value. NFL Network recognizes his value. The Super Bowl networks recognize his value. Mike has woven himself back into the fabric of the NFL.
Earned it back.
He's earned it back. He's earned it back by showing up, being the charismatic guy, that we know Mike to be. Right? And one thing that was also interesting was that the gentleman said that he was being very charismatic.
Right.
And if you've ever been in a company, I've been in a company with Mr. Irving, he's very charismatic. He makes you feel like you're a star. He makes you feel like you're a part of his environment, wherever he is. And so when he said this sickens him in his interview, I could empathize with him because she approached their group of individuals, and wanted to engage him. And he did the same thing that everybody knows him to do, make her feel like she's part of his world.
A
And
90-second conversation. Here's what I want to do. I want to stay with this. I'd like you to stay with me on this as we go through this. We talk about it today, but I want you to come back and let's okay. All right, Attorney Dietrich Moore. And on the others, I have so much I could say about this because there are so many undertones to this story that are just so visible, and it's bad. Next week, Chief Paul is going to be on the show, and we're going to keep talking about this. So you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week on the Clay Young Show.